Hi, I'm Brian Bachelder, and welcome to New Horizons in Bonsai, the show that shows you how to have success with bonsai indoors or out with a new method, using mostly tropicals. Now, last week we discussed fruiting trees, trees with flowers that bear fruit, more interesting shapes, something a little different so that you didn't wind up with a collection of just foliage. This week we have foliage, but a little different. We have unusual foliage plants, and I have a variety of things to show you, and we have a cycad to make into a bonsai. So let's get started. Let's move right over here. Now, this first one that we're going to look at is a dwarf Schefflera known as Arbicola, and the feature here obviously is this remarkable root development, besides this nice crest of foliage that crowns the plant and the very reduced size of the leaves. This is achieved by a major pruning in the beginning, as well as pinching and nipping as the new growth grows out. And simply by keeping the root mass flat through pruning and containing in either a flat container or no container over a board or something like that, a table, it stays nice and flat. I'm going to turn this slowly so you can appreciate the scale of this tree. It's very small, but it looks pretty mammoth. It has those beautiful roots, like a miniature little landscape under there. I'm rather pleased with this one myself, and people always comment on it. It seems to surprise a lot of people that it could be so developed. Now, I started developing this plant about 4 years ago, and it was a perfectly ordinary nursery plant when I got it. Very similar to this one right here, which I just happened by good luck to have right here. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to prune this back drastically, take it out of the pot, set it up as a bonsai, and I think we're going to have time to look at something interesting after that with the cycads. So let's get out our little dirt tray, or if you're working in your backyard, you can just let her rip right there. Well, first, let's set that down and let's get rid of some of that overly long foliage, because I don't like to be hiding behind the trees back here, so I'm going to be limiting the foliage here. Let's just get rid of this. Now, if you like these plants, if you look closely at this, you will see little tiny bumps all along the back of the foliage. And those little tiny bumps are the adventitious root cells, which are waiting to come growing out of there as soon as you place this into damp sand or sphagnum or some other rooting material. So if you want more of these, or you want to do aggregate grafting or make yourself a group planting, hang on to those and root them. Don't worry if the top wilts, they'll spring right back. So let's just shorten all of these so that it's easier to work with, because I know that we're going to wind up with a very reduced plant when we're done. So long as you know you're outside the bounds of your finished design, you can go ahead and prune without any thought. Just be certain that you are within outside the boundaries of your design so you don't spoil it for later. There's that out of the way. Now let's take this guy out of here and see what we've got. The Arbicola is another plant that is very friendly to root pruning because it heals so rapidly. This is another beautifully grown plant. You can see there's just a few circling roots at the top, and the majority of them are evenly spaced throughout, no long circling roots. So this is going to be a nice one to work with. Just get rid of that soil. I'm glad you're seeing me do this every time, because this is what really frightens a lot of people needlessly. Many people have this mysterious idea that somehow the roots are going to die if you touch them, and they won't. You can take them out, you can look at them, handle them, so long as you keep them moist. That's very important. Don't let the roots dry out. Don't start and answer the telephone. Don't start and decide it's a good time to go make lunch. Don't do anything but finish what you're doing. Try to work in the shade. Don't work in the full sun, and everything will be fine. Okay, this is going well. Let's clear this out. Now this plant probably started as nothing more than a series of cuttings all stuck in the same pot. But over the couple of months they've been in this pot, they've started to grow together very nicely. They're making a good group. I'm just going to tap this out here. Try to speed up that soil removal. All right, now let's get rid of this. And let's rinse these roots and see what we've got in here. There we go. Now, Schefflera is an exception to many, many other plants in that the roots will extend through the air. They'll cross a cavity, so you not only do not have to be quite as careful to fill in every little gap with the sphagnum, you also can be a little more aggressive about exposing any of the roots that you think are attractive. And what we're going to do is we're going to plant this quite a bit higher so that we show off some of these roots that are already beginning to look nice and fat. So let's shear these off. And because the arbicola heals so quickly, we're just going to, as a matter of fact, let's do it this way. Let's find the giant knife and let's just do it a little more rapidly than we might. We want a flat root ball anyway. Just shear those off. What could be easier? Now we have a nice flat stand for this little tree. And that'll work just fine. I think we can take even more of that off of there, though. I like them to sit nice and flat in the container. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. That's nice and flat now. Now let's just take a moment and get rid of a few of the leaves that are hiding our view. Remember that the leaf pruning can be just as effective and important as the branch pruning, because if you can't see in there, you're missing the impact of your planting. You want to be able to see the major trunks and the roots. So get rid of those leaves that are blocking your view. Now, of course, I'm rushing a little to accommodate everything I'd like to show you today, but try to just take your time and look your tree over. Try to enjoy this process too. The point of this is not to make nasty work for you, but to immediately begin handling and bonding with your plant. Bonsai has an astounding energy connected with it. And when you begin to spend time with your trees, you're going to find that you come in with an odd sense of satisfaction, something that is given back to you. And there are very few hobbies that can do that. Bonsai does not make you tired. Bonsai refreshes you. It's almost as good as a good nap. Okay, we've got that settled out. Now let's just clear away this debris. And now let's select our pot. Maybe something a little smaller. And this is a nice pot because it's already got a little growth of moss on the outside. It's already a little weathered. This will help our tree look a little older. Get our makeshift taboulet in there. And now we're set to start with our moss. Now, like I mentioned, you do not have to be as careful with the Schefflera because it is an aggressive grower. It does not mind going across a cavity. So we'll just pat a little of the moss in the bottom and position our plant on top of it. And even though the roots are spilling out all over, don't worry about that. Just keep adding moss to this. And you know how we do. Just keep adding the moss. We're going to add it quickly at first, and then we're going to go back and we're going to smooth it out, make it look great. These make wonderful gifts too, you know, for just a little effort and some ingenuity. You can make someone something they could never find to buy. Especially if you make them a few weeks or months ahead of time so that the tree is settled in. Everybody loves a bonsai for a present. And when you get good at it, you're going to find that you wind up with more than you think. They're tough to wrap, but if you stick a bow on them, people usually are very glad to have them. And if they aren't, who wants to get them in something anyway? So just get those roots in there. This is going to be a beauty. Now let's do the best part. Let's get that moss up there. Just lay that moss in there. Big pieces are nice if you can find them. You see, just take that. You've seen this before. You'll see it again. This is a nice part of this. This is one of the few things in common with the traditional method. This top dressing of moss. Incidentally, I don't want to mislead anyone. The traditionalists also use larger plants and cut them down to smaller sizes. But the difference is that they tend to take months or even years and years to recoup from this. Remember to just keep pressing the moss into the surface. And here and there are points of agreement with the traditional method. And again, just so that no one thinks that we're trying to displace the traditional method, which is absolute perfection for a temperate climate. It's just that the traditional method does not succeed very well with tropicals, which need a different technique because they're so robust and they respond in a different way. It was quite by accident that it was discovered that the trees done with this method mature so much faster. And of course, the point is not to have old-looking trees in a hurry. The point is to derive the spiritual and emotional benefit from bonsai. However, if inadvertently you can have old-looking trees right away, I think I can manage to suffer with that. Because they are more fun when they look old. There, now we've got the top all mossed. Now we're going to press this into place. And I have deliberately allowed some of the roots, for instance this one, I've allowed some of the roots to be out of the sphagnum so that they will just simply hang in the air because the Schefflera does send roots out into the air seeking new places to grow. And in fact, the roots from this are going to come climbing out of the pot and cover it up if I don't stay on them. Now let's finish our pruning. What we're going to do with the Schefflera, since it bounces right back so fast, is reduce it to a series of what look like simple stumps. So we're going to remove these growths at various heights. This is not going to look good immediately. When it's done, it's just going to look like stumps. But in a few weeks, when this growth grows out and is replaced, it's going to be magnificent. You'll just have to trust me on this one. So this is the way to set up a dwarf Schefflera or an arbicola, as they're called botanically. And as the new growth grows out from this and is is replaced by smaller and smaller growth, you can remove these larger ones. And you will go from this to this larger one here in just a few months. That's exactly how this one started out. Now let's put this aside and look at some other interesting foliage plants. Let's clear the deck. Look, honey. My wife is cringing at home watching this. Now here's something interesting. This is called a podocarpus. And as you can see, it's without a pot at the moment, and it's perfectly happy. And you can see how small the foliage is. And as a matter of fact, right in front of the desk, right here, is a podocarpus. And you can see for yourself how reduced the foliage is. The foliage is very reduced on this one. We're going to be creating a podocarpus later in the series. These are marvelous because they look like northern evergreens, and yet they are tropical. They are a tropical or subtropical tree. They do very well in a southeast or west exposure. Just mist them often, and they should give you no problem. Grow them in the sphagnum like we've been doing. Feed them every week. They'll be just fine. Now here's a very interesting series of plants. This particular one is in the Zamia family. This is referred to in the subtropical and tropical areas where it's grown as a kunti, and it generally grows with this part of its base underground. However, for our bonsai purposes, I've exposed this, and it's quite an interesting shape. In the center, if I part these leaves, I hope you'll be able to see this uncurling frond here. The kunti has a very interesting fern-like foliage that comes up just like a fiddlehead, and then the leaves unfurl. And it's a very interesting little plant, and these do get smaller as you apply the principles of reduction. And that is the kunti of the Zamia family. Now, here, right now, we have what's called a sago from the cycad family. Cycads are referred to, even though it's somewhat contradictory, as a living fossil because they were alive during the Cretaceous and Devonian period, the age of coal, and are responsible for the vast majority of coal and oil development that we enjoy today. And you'll notice that this one has begun to grow slightly rebellious large fronds, so we're going to edit those. Let's just get rid of those. This doesn't hurt them at all. There we go. And now it's a little more in keeping, and the next foliage that grows up will be a little smaller. I want to point out to you the small pup on the side of this plant. These trees do not make these pups until they're mature. And the fact that this has begun to make these pups on its trunk is proof that as far as this tree is concerned, it's 100% more mature than before. So it's happy, it's having fun, it's ready for a mature life. That's the sago. Now here we have something similar to the kunti. This is a seedling, a very young seedling that I've started, and you see already it has this thick, meaty little trunk, and the new foliage that's growing in is quite a bit smaller than this older foliage. And they're very handsome plants. Maybe you can see the iridescent luster on these leaves and the thick, leathery quality of them. They're almost like plastic. They're so thick and waxy. These do fine up north, all around the country. They're great for the greenhouse. They're wonderful for the backyard if you live in subtropical or tropical areas. So these are the representatives of the sago family. And I happen to have, by the most extraordinary luck, a sago right here. And this is how they come in the nursery pot. And as you can see, it's a rather large container, but we know how to fix that. So let's take it out of the soil and set it up in its pot pronto. Get our impedimentia ready here. Just Let's take this right out of here. You see, this really does not need all that dirt. Here are the roots winding around the bottom, and we have a cure for that. This is a nice little plant. It's just grown, these beautiful little heads of fresh green foliage all across the top. And we'll want to be exposing this interesting plant body here at the bottom. Growers generally tend to cover those up quite a bit. Personally, I like to see them. I like to see them out where I can enjoy the thorny quality of the outside. Okay, let's rinse this off. Oh, what a nice one. This is great. This is a beauty. This is going to be great. There we go. Put my hose back. There, look at those roots. This is great. Now, when you find roots like this that are this developed and handsome, you certainly want to expose them. You want to be able to see these to appreciate their beauty. This is just beautiful. And these plants are tough. Do not worry about damaging the plant. I'm not saying be reckless, but don't worry. Don't get yourself all out of sorts that the plant is not going to adapt. Let's just trim these back so that they fit in our container. We're going to just trim these off. There we go. Oh, this is nice. This is going to be a snap. The proverbial snap. Now all we need to do is choose a container. I was going to choose this one, but as I've said before, you sometimes don't know how things are going to work out until you get into them. And I think that we could cut these roots off a little more and accommodate this pot, but these are so nice. Let's stay with this idea instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to borrow this. Thank you. And now we're going to do what you're familiar with already. We're going to stuff a little of this moss around all those roots. And it's doing the Maryland softshell crab thing here. It's holding it in for us. And now we're going to put a little of that in here. And we're going to pack this in. There we go. It's a little easier if we work up here so the water can drain. And so you folks at home can share the excitement of on-the-spot bonsai creation. Something you certainly don't see every day. Although if I have my way, you may. And here we go. We'll just pack that in there. And now we'll start with our surface moss. Because remember, if you're in the theater, it's not over till the fat lady sings, but in bonsai, it ain't over till they got their moss. So just put that in there. Some people have asked me how I started with bonsai. And I started as a very, very small child. I was about 7 years old. And they just seemed very interesting to me. I liked dinosaurs and fantasy movies and adventure films, and I always liked King Kong, not for King Kong, but for the dinosaurs. They were just super. So, bonsai seemed like a good way to keep that particular idea of fantasy in my life. And they really have worked out to be like that because they look old, but they're not. They're miniature. They look like living representatives of huge trees in little pots. And they're very interesting. And anyway, as my favorite Greek-American soprano once said in the 50s, it amuses me to overcome a difficulty. I really can't think of anything more entertaining than taking something difficult and mastering it, making it easy. And now that I've learned for myself how to do this new method, which is so efficacious, as they say in jolly England, I want to share it with everybody so they can have a good time with bonsai. There we go. This is all set. Let's get rid of this. And we'll just have to hose this down, and we're all set. So there's our cycad. Until next time, I'm Brian Bachelder. Hi, I'm Brian Bachelder, and welcome to New Horizons in Bonsai, the show that teaches you a new method for making your own bonsai that's simpler than the traditional method, more successful in southern areas, and is adaptable to indoor growing for the first time in 2,000 years. Now, last week, we made this cycad here into a bonsai, and it worked out very well. As a matter of fact, you may remember that we decided not to use a smaller pot as I'd originally anticipated, so that we could keep and show off these handsome stilt-like roots here. This is a lovely little specimen, and as you can see, the foliage is a little smaller at the bottom. This is brand new foliage that's just grown out. And what we'll do is the next time we see the fiddleheads beginning to emerge from the center of this cone, we can cut these away. And if the new ones are still not smaller, like these down here, we can cut them away and force the plant to grow yet another batch. All plants have a reserve growth mechanism, and part of the traditional method is a leaf pruning in the middle of the growing season for each particular species that consists of removing nearly all the foliage so that the plant is forced to grow a new batch which is inevitably smaller. So we'll have one last look at this, and then we're going to talk about my very first tropical bonsai. This is a really special little plant. This is a sea grape in the Cocaluba species, and I'll turn this slowly as I tell you about it. When I first moved to Florida 10 years ago, the first thing I did as soon as I stepped out of the car that brought me to where I was staying was I grabbed a sea grape seed and I planted it, and that's how I got this little tree. Over the years, what I've done is, at first, when it was growing straight up, I planted it on its side so that it got this upward lean to it. Then over the years, as I repotted it, I just made sure that I exposed more and more of this gnarling, winding root. And as you can see, the foliage is very, very small. Now, just to impress on you what a tremendous reduction this is, let me show you this tree next to a normal sea grape leaf. You can see that the reduction is extreme. I'm going to remove the smallest leaf from this little tree and hold them up for comparison. You can see that that is quite an amazing reduction. I can't even figure out what percentage that is. That would be about, well, let's not even think about it. It's small. So let's look at our nursery sea grape and see what we've got. Now, this is the nursery sea grape. This is a nicely grown plant. And there's something I want to point out to you here happening at the base of it. Let's look down here at the bottom. I'll just move this over so that I can be seen. You see the small growth coming out of the bottom here. This is an example, or rather the evidence of a mechanism that I'd like all of you to understand as you work on your trees. The point of foliage, of course, is to make food for the tree, and to do that, it's got to be in the maximum amount of light each species requires. So being that plants are very sensible, the foliage always grows out and away from the point of origin so that it doesn't get shadowed by the other leaves. It tries to get out into the sun and the fresh air and the rain so that it can get everything it needs. So what nature has done is she has endowed the growing tip here, the end that continues growing, with the ability to produce a hormone that inhibits the other buds up and down the stalk. And what happens when the growing tip gets far enough away is the hormone does not reach that part of the tissue, and what happens is the adventitious buds that have been lying dormant, being restrained, now come forth to take their place. And that makes sense too, because as this grows away and these leaves mature, they're going to drop so that these are exposed to more sun and they will grow up just as this has done. Now what we do when we remove the growing tips of our bonsai, we keep that hormone out of the plant system. All the adventitious buds are growing. It's continually sending out new growth so that we have smaller leaves, a more dense habit, and we have a number of choices to make our directional pruning cuts. So we don't need wire, we don't need string in most cases. Now let's take this out of the soil and see what we've got to work with as a bonsai. Get our little soil catcher. And I think I'll just move this out of the way for safekeeping. Let's horse this out of the container. And let's see what these roots are doing. The sea grape is another tremendously hardy plant. Those of you that have never witnessed a tropical tree being cut down and the stump springing back in a number of weeks to be nearly as large as the original tree really can't appreciate the tremendous vitality that these plants have. They bear very little in common with their northern cousins in the way they grow. So let's get the soil out of here. I hear my muse in the background singing. Sounded like E natural. We'll get all the soil out of here. There we go. Let me get rid of this. And let's do a little rinsing in the sink. Remember, do not do this in your own sink. Outside is a good place. Ah, excellent. I have a friend that's a doctor. I'm grinning because there's a little story about that saying. I have a friend that's a doctor, and of course he never wanted to say oops in the operating room, so he trained himself instead to say, ah, excellent. So remember that next time you're under the knife. And here we have this little tree. There we, oop. Gracious. So here we go. This looks fine. This looks really good. Now, just as I suspected, this is 3 cuttings that are planted very close together, but as we know already about aggregate grafting, they will grow together as a single tree, and this is going to be an interesting shape. So let's not mess with that. Let's keep that just the way it is. We've gotten lucky with that. Also, this is a very small root mass right in the center, so let's capitalize on that. Let's capitalize on this small root mass right here and these low little branches right here, and let's cut this down a little bit so it's not so cumbersome to work with. Remember, if you know the general confines of your tree, you can rush through this stage. Like I know, for instance, we don't want those tremendously large, nasty pieces. So now it's easier to work with. Now let's take care of these roots. These fine roots don't cut so easily with my pruners, so we'll use these scissors. Siswals. and we'll just trim up these roots. Don't be worried about this, just go ahead and trim them up. And you notice this is another divergence from traditional method. The traditional people, and rightly so, in their beautiful traditional method, would sort through these roots and pick and choose which to cut, which not to cut, how long to cut certain ones. We just simply shear off the bottom. Tropicals are so tremendously forgiving, and we can use that to our advantage. Tropical trees have such a hard life in the jungle that anything short of incinerating them, they can take right in their stride. So let's put this in here. Let's get out our little makeshift taboulet, and let's choose one of these really little pots. Here's a nice little glazed pot right there. And as you can see, even though it's small, it's got the prerequisite great drainage right there. Being glazed, it's important that it have that good drainage. And it will be a simple thing to fit this guy right in there and plant him up and then complete our pruning. So let's get that done. I see just a little soil left in this. I'm going to take a second to get rid of that. You want to be certain to get all that soil out. There we go. There. Okay, I've got my sphagnum. And what we're going to do, we're going to pot this up high. Look again at these roots. Look at how nice that root development is right there. It's very sturdy, it's very tough, it's already got bark on it. We can expose that to the air safely. So what we're going to do is we're going to pack just the bottom part with the moss. And we're going to fill in those little crevices all along there. And over the weeks, the tree will feed on that sphagnum. There we go. And then we'll fit that in. We'll fit this in, just force that moss in there. Now, I don't mean to make this look easier than it is. I don't mean to imply that you should only take 5 seconds to do this. Take your time, work slowly and carefully. You won't be under the time constraints that I have here to show you everything. So just work slowly and carefully. And if you have unanswered questions, remember that all of the information is all written down in an easy-to-read book which is available. So just do your best and, above all, enjoy it. Try to see it as a system so that as time goes on, you not only understand it to succeed in the things that I've shown you, but so that you can invent your own things as you go. I want you to be able to become so comfortable with this that you can adapt it to your life and your plants so that you can make your bonsai garden a reflection of yourself. Now, here's our tray of moss for dressing the top. Just press this green moss in there. I happened to get lucky this morning. I found an especially choice bed of liverworts. Maybe we can get a nice shot of these liverworts. Liverworts are exceptional plants in that they have an almost brain coral-like pattern running across them. And this one is infused with a little kind of moss through here, but we're going to use this liverwort in here. This is a gorgeous thing. And we'll spread that right across there. They sound unattractive, but liverworts are actually among the most beautiful plants in the world, and they're perfect for what we're doing because they're very tiny. So we'll settle that in. Remember, as you work the moss in, to get the moss to go right up to the roots and around the roots so that it looks like it's grown in there, not like someone just popped it in yesterday. And of course, pick out any little weeds now. I think we'll just get a more interesting piece to finish this corner. Sometimes it's nice if the moss ventures out over the edge of the pot, makes it look like it's been in there a while longer. Remember to press that moss in there until you feel it squashing between your fingers, and then you know that the water is oozing through and making good contact. If the water doesn't make good contact, the moss won't grow and thrive. But if it does, you're all set. Yeah, that looks nice. That looks nice. We just need another little piece to get in those areas, finish those off. There we go. And now we're ready to start our top pruning. Okay. Now, the thing to remember while you're top pruning is wherever you have the opportunity to pick up the line of another branch so that you don't create just a cut-off stump. It's a good idea to pick up that other branch. Now here, for instance, let me eliminate these leaves and you can see this a little more clearly. You can see that this branch flows into this very small branch that's just started. So what we're going to do is we're going to terminate this branch right after that small branch. And now visually what happens is this continues into here, especially when this fills out a little more. This cut will be covered over and nobody will ever know that you did that. Or if they do, they'll say, that person's really clever, they knew how to cut that properly. We'll shorten all of these. Remember, the sea grape is a rambunctious grower, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you're cutting off too much. It's going to spring out as soon as the roots begin to heal. Now, in a three-stemmed planting like this, I like to have the center one, the long one, and the other two a little shorter. So here we have these shortened. We've allowed these to continue the line of these trunks that we've shortened, and we've also preserved some of the smaller foliage. Now we can eliminate quite a bit more of this. Let's do a little leaf pruning to get rid of those overly long, large leaves. And now this is just about ready to take its place in a shady part of the bonsai garden to do its healing. And as soon as we see new growth, we're going to put it out in good sun and start feeding it. Do not ever feed your bonsai when you first create them. You must wait until you see signs of new growth. And that would be fresh new green foliage, or as you look at the drain holes, it would be the new white roots coming out. And this is fine. This is just fine. Remember that there is a simple test for whether they're potted tightly enough or not. You should be able to simply turn them out of the pot and have them stay together. This is another difference from the soil method. Obviously, if this was 3 layers of sifted soil, we would not be able to do this. But this should stay together. It should be nice and firm. And if it falls apart, you know you need to go back and work some more. So fit that in. Also, if you wanted to just set this out on a decorative rock or a container, sometimes when it rains really hard, if I'm worried about overwatering, if it rains day after day after day like it sometimes does in the tropics, I might turn the pot over and just set that up there so that it drains completely and I don't have to worry about them. So for now, let's pop this back in its container. And of course, the outside of the container gets a little messy in the repotting process, so just take either your sprayer or a fine setting on your hose and clean that off. And then, if you're able to, in the morning and in the afternoon, you'll want to mist this down to help it get a head start on its new life as a bonsai. So there's our sea grape, all set up. That should do very, very nicely. And now I have another very interesting example of the reduction to show you. As you know, if you've watched the show, you know that I'm very big on not just using foliage plants, pines and maples and the usual bonsai thing, juniper after juniper after juniper. We've all seen bonsai gardens of 100,000 junipers and a maple. Now here, I'm going to bring up on the table an oleander. Oleander is a very popular plant in the tropics, and it's beginning to gain popularity for sunny windows, particularly southern hot sunny windows, all through the northern areas. The flowers come a variety of colors: red, brilliant white, shades of pink, peach. There's a dwarf variety of oleander. This is the standard variety. And they're very, very easy. They're not demanding. They like good feeding. They're a good plant for windows that get too hot for most anything else in the summer. I used to live in New York, and I had a south window, and most of the plants I had baked and died in the summer because of the heat. These thrive in those conditions. Now right here, I have an example. This is the same kind of plant. It's a standard oleander, and it's been trained for a little over 1 year. And you can see how incredibly small the leaves are. I'll pull a normal leaf off of this one, and you can get an idea of just how much those leaves have reduced. As you can also see, as you compare, I'll cut a piece of this. Look at the difference in the growth habit. These stems are long and ungainly with regular intervals between the foliage, and they tend to grow in a straight line. And this one is interestingly bent and crooked. You can see these old pruning decisions that I've made. This, frankly, is a little unfortunate. That little stub right there is not so attractive. But I hope that in time that's going to scab over and it'll be less apparent, and perhaps in time that will look a lot better. What I'm going to work on now for the next couple of months with this plant is to get these limbs to be a little more horizontal. And what I do is, rather than wiring, I just coax them. I just pull them down gently, and I just tease the tissue a little bit. I don't spend hours at it. Maybe when I'm out there watering, I just do it like I'm doing now, and then I leave them. Now today they spring up a little bit. Maybe next time I do it they don't spring up so high, and over the course of the next couple of months they're going to be nice and horizontal. So this is a great example of foliage, of flowers and foliage. And as foliage goes, this is kind of an interesting foliage. You can also see that the canopies are beginning to be much more pronounced on this. Let me turn this so you can see it from another direction. And of course, it comes right out of the pot the way they also do, the way they always do. Now I want to show you how to do some more of the root pruning. So I might as well use this one. This looks severe, but it really is not. I want you to be comfortable with this whole process, and this is how simple this root pruning is. You don't have to wonder which roots to cut. You don't have to give yourself anxiety wondering how to go about it. All you need to do is begin cutting at the edge and cut your way around. Just cut your way around the planting. You can see I'm shearing off. The total mass on this is about 6 inches, and I'm cutting off about the outside inch or so, all the way around. There. And now I have a very diminished root ball, and what I'm going to do is just take some of the sphagnum we know and love so well, spread a little bit of it on the bottom, pop that right in there, and position it at the back of the pot so that it's a little more balanced with the tree leaning over the rest of the pot, and pack in that fresh sphagnum. Just pushing it right in there so it's nice and tight so that the new roots that are emerging can come right out and wander right into that new sphagnum. And if they could talk, you'd hear it saying, "Oh, I like this. This is delicious. Can I have some more?" But we don't give them more because we don't want them to get too big. So let that guy sit right in there. And now, of course, we do the fun part. We do the cosmetic part. We just lay on that decorative moss. Pull out the weeds as you go. Oh boy, artillery fern. For anybody that lives in the tropics knows what a tremendous pest artillery fern is. There. And we're all set. You just push that in there. Settle that all in, and you're all set. So what we're going to do next time is we're going to be creating that nursery oleander down into a bonsai. We'll get it all set up, and we'll get you into the blooming flower ones. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this segment on bonsai. Give it your best shot. Don't be worried. And until next time, I'm Brian Bachelder. Hi, I'm Brian Bachelder. Welcome to New Horizons in Bonsai, the show that teaches you a new method to make it easier to grow great bonsai in the house up north, outside down south, all around. Now, today we're going to do something very interesting. I'm going to show you a group of bonsai that are true bonsai and yet are not generally considered as trees. The only prerequisite of making any plant into a bonsai is that you choose something with woody permanent growth. Obviously, if you use something like a begonia or a soft plant, it may look good for a few months, but when it completes its life cycle in a year or a year and a half, it's going to die. And we don't want that. We put too much time in them. So always choose something that's woody. So long as it's woody, it could be a small shrub, it could be a hedge plant, it could be a full-grown tree, it could be a variety of things, so long as it is woody. Now today we're going to look at plants that look tree-like but aren't. And then we're going to discuss some diagrams of groups and look at some of the groups I brought. For instance, let's jump ahead 1 second and look at this group right over here. Now here we have a group of native Florida cypress. And this not only is a rather handsome specimen, if I say so myself, it fulfills all of the requirements of true bonsai in that the foliage is greatly reduced, the growth habit is true to the species, and is also very reduced and compacted. And as you can see, it's sitting in this little tub of water, just the way cypress like to do. As a matter of fact, I have an identical group at home, other than they are not nearly as mature looking. When I did this one, I was uncertain as to whether it should sit in water or not. So as a control, I left one out of water. I put these in a tub of water, just like you see it. And this one is now much more mature looking than the other. So if you deal with cypress, try to find an attractive container where you can have the roots sitting in water. They really do enjoy it. Now this may make a little confusion as to how to feed something like this. What I do is every time I feed my trees, I remove some of the water from the tray and I pour the 20-20-20 solution into this, say about half full. Make certain that the solution is not overly strong. Mix it according to directions. And then as I water the group every day, as I water all my trees, it just simply filters out. And by the end of the week, it's ready for another shot. Now, as I turn this group slowly, very slowly, because our remarkable little lazy Susan is buried under here somewhere, you'll be able to see this group from all sides, and you'll notice a very interesting thing. Some of the trees are much thicker than the others. And as you look at the entire group, you will probably notice that the thickest ones are the ones that are just slightly taller than the others. Every tree in this group is a slightly different height than its neighbor. The trees have intuitively sorted out which among them has achieved dominance in the design because of their height, and they've exerted that dominance in the thickness of their trunks. I'm not certain yet how they do that, but I hope as the years go on, there are many questions about bonsai that I may be able to find answers for. For instance, one of the most interesting is whether the trees reduce at a cellular level. In other words, do the leaves have the same number of cells as a normal leaf, and are the cells all smaller? Or do the leaves have a smaller number of normal-sized cells? It's going to take a little more research than I can do right now to find the answers for these. So there's the group of cypress, beautifully mossed over. And this leads me to something else people occasionally ask. They say, Brian, how did you get started with bonsai? Well, being that I'm an artist, this is one of the things I like to do, and it helps me recapture periods of my life that I really enjoyed. You know, childhood is a special time, and I always summered in Maine, and this is very reminiscent, although these are tropical trees, of the pines in Maine and the way they sit in the cold water lakes there. And every summer we would go up to Ossipee Lake and spend the summer there. And this looks very, very similar with this colored gravel, and this is very similar to that. So try to make your trees a statement of your own life. Instead of taking a tropical tree, forcing it into oriental-looking right angles and copying designs that the Chinese and Japanese have done, look at the native trees you're working with, or the tropicals. If you're in a temperate area working with tropicals, thumb through reference books or magazines from the South to see the spread of the giant ficus trees, or the way the carambola bushes bear their fruit. Look at these things and use these natural designs so that you don't thwart the character of these trees. These trees want to express themselves. They have their own incredible shapes. Now let's take a look at some of these other trees I brought today, which are examples of plants that may not be true trees, but we can make very tree-like, tree-esque. Bonjour, triettes. Okay, now this is our wild Florida grape, which we saw before, so I will speed through this one, but it bears a repeated look. You can see that the grapevine itself has got these pretty little adventitious roots, which are thickening up nicely. It has this horizontal spread. And I'm going to spread these leaves here and show you the very top of it so that you can see that the top of it was broken off. That was a completely natural effect. It was that way when I found it. I didn't do that. So I just dug the little guy up and worked with the roots, packed it into the moss, and have been developing this top foliage. And as you can see, it's without a pot. Looks just fine. So that's our grape. Now here's an interesting one. Some of you probably would like to grow roses but don't have the room or whatever. Here is a promise rose, a gorgeous rose. The flowers on this are normally about this big. However, the flowers on this rose are about that big. And they're perfectly shaped. They're the pink color that it's famous for. You see this nice mossed over bit here. And the trunk here is a little uninteresting right now because it's so perfectly straight, the way roses are. And in time it's going to fatten up, and this is going to become semi-permanent. So I think this is going to be an interesting thing. This is our rose. Now here we're going to talk on another session about vines as bonsai, but here is a beauty. This is a rather rare vine. Even in the tropics, this is called a chalice vine. It's famous for gold, wine glass-shaped flowers that pop out at various angles once it drops its foliage. This is a deciduous plant, which is always lots of fun because we can play Is It Asleep or Into Mort. So every year it's a relief when it leafs right out, and it's a lot of fun when people who don't know me come over and they say, "Oh, you killed that one, didn't you?" So here it is, all leafed out. All of you that saw it bare, now you know. So that's our chalice vine. Now right here we have an interesting little thing. This is a Mexican flame vine. It has little daisy-like flowers when it's in bloom, brilliant orange. This will bloom in a south or west window. Up north it blooms beautifully down here outside. They have it in the West Coast, they have it in Mexico and all through South America. So this is a choice little number when you can find it. And you can see, if you look closely, you can see the particularly cork-like bark with the fissures and the deep cracks all through it, and as a matter of fact, the moss is beginning to grow right up the tree. So there's the flame vine, and here is a real grotesque one. This plant is rare enough that it does not have a common name. The family name is Dioscorea. It's in the sweet potato family, Dioscoriaceae. The entire family consists of a large tuber and then a tremendously long viney growth, which in this case has been contained by pruning. And the leaves are very reduced, and they are ever reducing. Here's a beauty right here, which I will hold up for you to see. Very, very small leaf. There it is right there. Very small. So this is a nice plant if you can find it, but good luck finding it. I'm happy to show it to you today because it may be the only one you see. There are a number of Dioscorea available. The popular elephant's foot fern, Dioscorea elephantipodes, is one. Yams, sweet potato yams, are Dioscorea, and you can make a short-lived bonsai out of that. The beauty of this is that this is permanent. So that's our Dioscorea. Now here's another vine which you should be able to get a hold of. This is a jasmine. This is a beautiful, beautiful star jasmine. Has intensely fragrant flowers, and I pruned it for the show, but ordinarily it is covered with little white star-shaped flowers. Very, very nice, and you can see how large the trunk is. This is actually three. This is actually 3 mature plants masquerading as one tree. This is also a good example of what you can expect with aggregate grafting. When you plant things close enough that they bond as they grow. And so long as they're all the same species, that's an easy thing to do. So this is a beauty. Should be able to get jasmines from either from your florist or wherever you buy exotic plants. Now here is one of my oldest bonsai. This is a small asparagus fern. This is not the hanging asparagus. This is a different kind, and it makes this upright growth. And ordinarily, in about 5 or 6 years, the growths continue to get larger and larger. I've had this plant since 1976. So that would make this, now I have to do math. An artist doing math, this could be dangerous. I had it since 76. Figure it out yourself. And as you can see, it has the interesting roots. It's very reduced. Ordinarily, these little stems would be about this big around. So this is extremely reduced. We have a very similar asparagus right here. And we're going to be taking this out of the pot and setting it up as a bonsai. These make wonderful, wonderful faux bonsai. You can see that it has this interesting pine-like shape, and I think when we weed some of these out of here and do a little shaping, it's going to look, as my wife says, very tree-like. She's ever patient, and every time I come in with something new, she says, "Yes, dear, that's very tree-like." Here's our dirt-catching pot. We'll pick a relatively small pot to put this in. And if I can use used pots, I like to, because they're already broken in. They have a nice little moss beginning on them already, and of course they already have the drain hole. That's always nice. So let's take this guy out of here. This is eligible not only for our talk on plants that are not really trees, but also for groups. There we go. There it is. And remember, we just sort that dirt out of there. Now, the asparagus ferns are kind of interesting in that they have two kinds of roots. They have the usual kinds of roots that hold the plant in the ground and absorb the nutrients and water. And then they have these little storage bulbules. And I'll hold this up so you can see it. These storage bulbules are pretty interesting. They swell when there's available water, and they shrink when it needs water. Try not to break too many of them off, but it's no big deal because the plant will just grow new ones. So clear all this soil out of here. If you really want to look like a horticulturalist, never say dirt. Always say soil. Makes all the difference. And remember, never say oops, always say excellent. And you'll be on your road to being a professional. Now I'm going to take this over here and shake the dirt out into my trash can. There we go. And let's get rid of this soil. There we go. And now, let's go through a little root pruning. It's always nice to have the right tool for the right job. We'll just set this down. Now, this looks severe. I know I'm making light of this, but don't worry. This is just fine for the plant. There we go. Now we'll look through this. We've just made a tremendous reduction in the roots. Now's a good time to clear out some of the growth. And of course, the first selection to do is anything that's dead or not particularly attractive or misshapen. This is such a beautifully grown plant, there is not much to clear out in the way of dead growth or misshapen growth. But of course, we don't want all this. I mean, that's just a little much for our forest. So what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to clear away these ones that are just a little bendy. You know, they're a little bent. They don't look quite tree-like. So we want to get rid of those. Let's just leave the straight ones. And we'll clear out the small ones. We need to clear out enough that we can really look in there and see those interesting little trunks. I want to try to give it a nice shape here. Create an opening so that we can see through there. At the center is the old body of the plant where the old growth has fallen off, sitting in there like some kind of crab thing. Like that fabulous movie from the 50s, the giant crab monsters. Not as good as the 50-foot woman, but very close. So there we are. This is looking a little better now. We've left some new ones. Here's a twisty one. Let's get rid of that. Here's some yellow ones. Let's get rid of them. Here's another twisty one. Now remember, I've done this a few times, so I'm speeding along here for the sake of our television magic. But when you're at home, take your time, think about your decisions. I know in the beginning it's tough to plan because you're just finding your way, but do the best you can to find your way. Try to anticipate. Be cheerful if it doesn't work out. Let yourself make mistakes. It's not a tragedy. There is not a tremendous amount of karma involved if it dies. Of course, we hope they don't. We care about them all. They're living things that we prize. We take good care of them. But if it dies, just go out and get yourself another one. Try not to make the same mistakes. And I think you're going to find that after you do this a little bit, hardly anything ever dies. There we go. As a matter of fact, every single one I've made on the show looks great. They're in my backyard. They look just great. Now I'm going to reach down and get the moss. And you know how we need the moss. I'm going to save a little time. Now what we're going to do, we'll put our little pad of moss in the bottom, and we're going to push some moss up in there to cushion those roots. Just push that up in there. These are easy to work with because the roots are all nice and straight, lots of little gaps all between them. They're very agreeable in holding that moss in there. What could be easier? Just put that moss in there. As a matter of fact, here's something little. You could make a little group off to the side or share that with a friend. There we go. Now we've got the moss around the roots. We're going to settle it in. Settle that into the pot. Of course, you could use a traditional bonsai pot for this if you wanted to. I like these neutral saucers. They're plain enough that they don't distract from the tree. I've seen trees that would ordinarily on their own be pleasant enough be spoiled because they're in too loud a pot. You know, it's a shame to see a handsome tree undermined just because the pot steals the attention. There we go. Now we've got it set up in the pot. And now, let's do the top dressing of moss, which is the fun part, because that's when it really settles in and looks old. We'll just settle that moss on there. Big sheets are nice when you can get it. Oh, here's some liverworts from the other day. I like liverworts. We're going to feature those right up here. Remember, there's a variety of things that I mean when I refer to them as moss. Liverworts, certain club mosses, certain lichens, various things. Anything with little tiny leaves. There's a popular house plant known as baby tears. That's a beauty. Little tiny, tiny leaves, endlessly repeated in a rhythmic fashion by the plant. Very pretty little plant. Just set that moss on there so that you've got the surface covered. And I'm glad you're getting to see me do this every show, because I think in the beginning it's a very frightening process if you're not used to it. A lot of people are very, very nervous somehow to expose the roots and get in there and do these things to them. There we go. Now we've got the surface covered. Now we're going to do our pressing. Remember, you need to press. And can you see the water squashing out from between my fingers? Can you see that? If you feel and squeeze the water squashing out through your fingers, coming through the moss, you know you're making good contact. And as my friend Meg says, that's key. So, just squash this out. There we go. And now, with something with as many exposed roots as this, we want to bring the moss up. I'm going to do this so you can see it. Here's an empty space where these roots are diving all around. Let's work some of this moss in there so that the moss is in among the roots. And you see, that really looks like it's settled in there. So take your time and find your way around all the little spaces so that you get the moss all through there. And that's just about it. So we'll clear the deck here momentarily. And with bonsai that look as well established as this quick, you can look forward to your friends coming over and saying, these look really old. Which is one of the best things a bonsai grower can hear next to, here's the check. There we go. There's our subject for today. Now what I'd like to do, before you all go running out of here, is go over some diagrams for our groups. The groups are more complicated than the other things we've done. And especially with groups, it's a good idea to have a plan. One must have a plan for groups. Now here is the schematic diagram for the cypress grove over there. And you can see that I've drawn them out so that you have various levels of horizontal foliage that play off against the verticals of the trunk in this U shape that they sit in, which is balanced by the horizontal of the water. So this is a relatively simple mushroom type design. Now the next one is a little freer looking group, the horizontal of the pot, broken up by all the various verticals of the stems, balanced by the little ploofy canopies of the foliage. When I say canopy, what I mean is the groups of foliage that form clumps that relate to one another. Now this next one is a group of two that are semi-cascaded, and by some remarkable coincidence, I have that right here to show you today. Here is our group of these two trees. And I guess if I move this back here, perhaps you might be able to see them both together so that you can understand how to relate the tree to the diagram. You don't need to draw beautiful Albrecht Dürer type drawings of the trees. Just give it your best shot with the shapes. That's all you need to do. Now next time we're going to create a very complicated group. We're going to be using stones, large stones, arranged one in front of the other. We're going to be using junipers, and we're going to be playing those off with small ficus trees to create a miniature landscape. So we're going to take our time. We're going to arrange this stuff. What I'd like you to do until next time is look at your trees. Look all around you at the beautiful trees. Try to see them as shapes. If you can make little line drawings, don't worry, nobody has to see them. It's to get the information in the old head here so that when you're cutting, you know what you're doing. Please look around, enjoy the beauty. Till next time, I'm Brian Bachelder. Hi, I'm Brian Bachelder, and this is New Horizons in Bonsai, the show that teaches you a new method so you too can enjoy success with bonsai, indoor or out. And remember, it's a new method, it's a system from start to finish. Follow the directions, do not make any changes, don't make any substitutions, and you should have good success. Now I flashed through the method on the show so that we can accommodate the time span, but if you have unanswered questions, remember, it is all written down in an available book. So let's move right along. What we're going to do today is we're going to make a very complicated group planting. Now last time we were discussing our cypress grove, which I've left here because I'm real pleased with it. It's way cool. It's got water, it's got stones, it's got everything we need for a bonsai. So right here is our diagram of what we're going to create today. We're going to take these rocks, which I've laid out here, and we have these rather soapy, greasy, smooth ones with this interesting brain-like other kind of rock that has moss all in it. And we're going to make this complicated planting using junipers designated by J and ficus designated by F. And here they are, the ficus and the junipers, right here in our little chorus line of kicking trees. And we're going to take them out of the soil and get ready to make this planting. I'll just set this aside. Now groups are very, very satisfying for bonsai. And the thing to do is as they mature, you just have to ride herd on the two different species you're using so that the configuration of your group stays the same. For instance, juniper is a rather slow-growing species compared to the ficus. So if the ficus begin to grow up and get ahead of your design, be sure and trim them back. Pay close attention so that one day you don't look at them and say, that doesn't look like it should. What's wrong with this? This is a mess. Also, when using ficus, remember they do love to strangle things. So be careful that the aerial roots that come popping out aren't making too great a headway into the junipers. Now there's one. And just get these all free of their soil. These are beautiful, beautiful little ficus pruning cuttings. This is Ficus nerifolia, known as a great subject for bonsai because it has naturally very small leaves, an interesting branchy habit, and if you just keep this little guy pruned, he'll be a nice full little tree in no time. These already look like little trees. They're just going to take a little bit of pruning to make our group. I think I'll just rinse this one off to get that last of the soil out of there. And there it is. Just take all of them out of the soil first. And try to do this swiftly so that the other ones don't dry out while you're taking the last ones out of their pots. There we go. Oh, here's a nice root. So we're going to have some nice things to work with here. You're probably going to find as you work on your bonsai that you'll find yourself haunting the nurseries and various plant centers, always scrounging for new material. And it's a good idea to be on the lookout for things before you think you want them. That way, you have nice things to work with all the time. These are coming along just fine. These little cuttings are probably about 1.5 years old. Juniper is a very slow species to root. So personally, I would rather pay a little money and spend my time making bonsai than making juniper cuttings and watering and watering and watering. And the holidays come and go, and the junipers are sitting there, and you're watering and watering, and your kids are graduating from high school into college, and you're watering, and finally the junipers are rooted. Personally, I'd rather go out and buy them so that I have them and I'm ready today. These are very nice. This will be a pleasure to work with. I'm going to have a lot more fun doing this than whoever's going to unplug that sink. It's a mess. I'm going to get rid of the dirt, get our little taboulet up there. Here's our pot. Take these out of here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a layer of the sphagnum in the bottom. And of course we've pre-soaked the sphagnum. Remember how we do. We always put it in the water and knead it up real good. Let it soak a little while. Maybe 5 minutes is fine. Work to get that all in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin settling in these large stones. These have semi-flat bottoms. It would be nice if you could saw them off or have them cut or break them so that they are really flat on the bottom. But I'm going to settle them into the sphagnum. Remember that the sphagnum is capable of being molded. And we're going to mound the sphagnum around the rocks so that they're held in nice and tight. You walk a little line here. You want them to be tight, but on the other hand, you really don't want it to be too much. You don't want it to look, you don't want it to look dopey, you know. You just want to settle it in there. And as soon as I get that one in there, then I'm going to squeeze in the next one. There we go. Use the sphagnum. And of course, we're going to be planting the little trees. We're going to be planting those little trees into the crevices. And that's another thing. Let's try to get our stones at various heights, slightly various attitudes in the moss so that it doesn't look mechanical. So the last thing you want to do is make some nasty mechanical looking planting. You want this to look like natural rock shelves. There we go. So that your friends are amazed and your family says, "Wow, I watched you do it and it looks 1,000,000 years old already." And then with any luck, your guests will come over and they'll walk up to your plants and they'll say, "Har, matey, how old be ye?" The answer, of course, is old enough to drink this here grog, but that's another story. So we'll settle that in there, get the moss between the stones, and remember, we're going to be putting the surface moss over this too. So we're going to have a great effect right away. And I like that. There's nothing like something looking great right away. Now, you don't want to fill them up too much because we've got the little trees to plant in there. So just get that started. And now, refer to the diagram so you know. Think ahead of time which trees you want where. I've selected this interesting little horizontally capped cutting right here to be the top. It's nice and flat. And as you can see, this is a great thing about cuttings. There's no taproot. There's just little thin fibrous roots that we're going to work with. So, just as always, we nestle this in the sphagnum, separate the roots so they're all nice and cushioned. Get that right in there. Just like you were going to pop it into a little pot, except we're going to be nestling it in the rocks. Now I'm holding the rocks together with one hand and settling the tree in with the other. It will only be a matter of a couple of short months. Tempted to say weeks, but let's not get too cocky. Probably short months, and the roots will be all through this. And then hardly anything will pull it apart. So we've got our first one in there. Now we want to put the other two here on the diagram at different heights. We don't want them at the same height because that's kind of boring. You know, if they're at the same height, it looks too routine. We'll make one a little higher than the other. And of course, they seem to point in a direction, one direction or the other, so let's use that. Let's use that to our advantage. There we go. Squeeze them in there, get them all nice and packed, and decide where to nestle this other tree. Just snooky that in there. There we go. And now we've got the other little juniper right here. This is going to be a tremendous effect when we have that in there. Now, you don't have to use junipers and ficus. You know, you can use a variety of species, or you can even have more than two. You can use things that flower or bear fruit. It's just that we're creating this craggy mountain look here, and the plants that tend to grow there are not usually what you'd think of as fruiting or flowering ornamentals. But hey, it's your garden, and you'll use flowers if you want to. So we'll get this in a Slightly different attitude than the other. Pack that moss in, and remember, this is a big advantage we've got over the soil people, because we can do this and just pack this in here. Now I want to repeat again, we are not trying to do away with the traditional method. The traditional method is a thing of exquisite beauty, a testament to the human spirit that, let me turn this so we can all see it, a testament to the human spirit that people were able over the centuries to go from simply visiting bonsai in their natural haunts to actually collecting them, to artificially learning to propagate them. And it is a remarkable thing in itself. However, as I said, personally, I was not satisfied with the way my bonsai were behaving when I moved to a tropical place. And I realized that it had a great deal to do with the fact that it is a method based on temperate trees, temperate climate, and those temperate weather changes. So when I began to consider that I was using tropicals and not temperate trees, that's when I decided that I really needed to change some things. And since I made those changes, I've had very, very good success with my trees. And I've been able to teach this method to hundreds of people in my adult classes and to younger people that have visited the house. And everyone is amazed at their own ability once they find out that it's within their scope. And I think that that's a big answer to many of the problems that this country or perhaps the world faces. If people could find that they too were capable of bringing a little more beauty inexpensively into their lives, I think they would all be a lot happier. I know I would. I know I am. Because I could never have afforded to buy these trees as set-up bonsai. Now here's our little juniper for the front. We'll settle this in here. In front of this rock. Now we're going to do some pruning on these when we're done. Now we've got our ficus to do. And the ficus are just like we've been doing. Push the moss into the roots. Ficus have strange little convoluted roots that tend to be just about perfect for holding the sphagnum in place while we manipulate the tree. And decide which is the side you want facing out. And go ahead and take a little plug of that sphagnum out of there and plop your tree in there. Settle that in. Now we're going to work to expose these rocks a little more. I think I'll just prune this back a little so that it doesn't quite hide everything so much. And remember, ficus roots easily, so if you settle this into a little pot of soil or sphagnum or gravel and keep it moist, you've got another little tree underway there. Now here's the beauty. This has got some real interesting roots here. We'll just show it the moss, get it settled in. I think we'll just do a little pruning here so that it's a little smaller to manage. And this one we're going to put on this side. I've arranged these trees in the diagram so that they are off-center, and it's a little more interesting. At least I think it is. If you've got a thing for symmetry, go ahead and indulge yourself. Put them symmetrically. They'll grow just fine. Get a little more moss. There we go. There. And we've got our other ficus. I think we'll put this one a little more in the back, over here behind its buddy here. So we used to say in Oldfield Point, Long Island, I think this is going terribly well. Just settle these in. There. Now let me turn it so I can get a look at it. Yes, this is working out fine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to firm these up a little, and then we're going to apply our top dressing of moss, which in this case is a little more involved than before, just because we have so many nooks and crannies to get into. Just like I've always done, I'm working with my fingers to settle this in, get these rocks showing. These are nice rocks too. I happen to get these at a tropical fish store. Tropical fish stores are great places to find interesting stones. Now, it sounds funny to buy stones at a store, but you know, Florida, which is where I just happen to be at the moment, doesn't have a lot of rocks. They do not have a lot of rocks here. So we buy rocks. There's any number of interesting rocks. You can use crystals or gems. I think we're ready to start the mossing on the top now. Clear the deck. Big on clearing that deck. Somebody's always messing it up. And now what we're going to do is look for, I've got lots and lots of little tiny pieces of moss. There we go. And now we're going to start laying the moss in just like we've always done. Don't be nervous just because it's a big group. Nothing to it. Just lay that moss in there. Leave it loose for the moment. Somebody asked me if I talk to my bonsai. Yes, of course I talk to my bonsai. Of course I talk to my bonsai. Because when you're around something long enough, you just can't help talking to it. And I think probably at some small scientific level, I think they enjoy the carbon dioxide we exhale. I think that's a little pick-me-up for them. I don't think bonsai just have to say no when it comes to breathing on them. I think that's just fine. And we'll get this moss all through here. Certainly would have been nice if I had large pieces of moss to work with, but we've got little tiny ones. That's just fine. Just take this moss and get it in there. Now I'll tilt this forward a little so that you can see into it. And there we go. You can see that the rocks are in there. We're viewing the rocks through the foliage. And we're going to do a little pruning on those little trees so that we see the rocks better. There we go. There's a piece that's large. We're just going to get our surface moss done because that's when things shape up. Now, about the moss, moss has its own little life cycle independent of your tree. And if you should find that your moss, for some reason, suddenly seems to just fade away, it's perfectly all right to go out and get new moss and put it right over the old moss, just as though there wasn't any there at all. And just squeeze that in and redo it, just as though it was new. Let's see. Now sometimes it comes right back all by itself. It has a little life cycle that's different from other ones. I'm smelling something like hair burning, which is certainly a calming effect while I'm working. I hope that it has nothing to do with, show it. Has nothing to do with us, this hair burning smell. There we go. Now you can see that I've got the moss there. Now I'm going to skip the back so that I don't have to take your time and mine doing the back here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with my fingertips to settle in that moss. And this is our opportunity now to get everything squashed in there so that the stones are showing nicely. There we go. And after we get it all settled in here, I'm going to do just a little quick pruning on it. There we go. Nice and green. Now pick a time to do groups like this when you have the time to take your time and think it over. And I wouldn't start just a few minutes before you got to make lunch for the kids or whatever. Now let's do a little clipping. Let's clip these a little smaller so that they're not so in the way of the rocks. After all, if we went to all that trouble to find good rocks, we sure don't want to just cover them up. Also, the ficus will grow back very rapidly. They're good little growers. So don't worry if you end up cutting quite a bit of them away. Prune this out so it all looks nice. There we go. I think we're getting there now. These little stems on the ficus will be shorter when it grows back. I think we'll just trim this one a little more. There we go. That's going to be nice. Now I think we'll just pull these stones up some. It's perfectly all right to adjust these as you settle them in. Get those stones up where we can really enjoy them. Hopefully people will come by and say, yeah, the trees are great, but God, look at those stones. Holy mackerel. He must have got those at a fish store. There we go. And with any luck, the people at the fish store are watching, and maybe next time I get my stones for free. So, there they are. Let's pull up the one in the back. Settle in that moss to keep it up there. There we go. Just grab a little more of this. Just settle that in. There we go. And that's our group. Now remember to keep these in a shaded place. Keep them in a shaded place, and as they settle in maybe a month or so, move them into more light. And once they're all set, you can begin feeding, just like we always do. Just move them into the fertilizer bucket, and you'll be all set. So that gives you an idea of how to set up a group. Give it your best shot. Don't worry. Just do your best. If it dies, try another one. What the heck? It doesn't take very long to do. Give it your best. Until next time, I'm Brian Bachelder.